Good evening. In this broadcast, the program time. Tonight, Orthodox faithful will celebrate the birth of Christ. And in 1 hour on our channel, a live broadcast of the triumphant divine service in the Epiphany Cathedral in Moscow will begin. This broadcast, in almost 1 month, we begin not with the events in Chechnya, but the greetings on the feast of the Most Holy Patriarch of Moscow and all Russia, Alexei II, in which, incidentally, the main topic of the day also couldn't be avoided. Dear brothers and sisters, in the advent of the great saving and bright feast of the birth of Christ, I address all of you living in the homeland and abroad, and sincerely congratulate all of you on the great feast of the birth of Christ. I wish you a bright and joyous celebration, that your souls may be engulfed in light, joy, and peace. Not everything is calm in our homeland, but we hope that the joy of the feast will pacify the souls of men, and there will be peace and accord in our homeland and in the world in general, where there is unrest and people are in conflict with each other. I wish that the new year which has come would be for all of us a year of health, prosperity, and harmony, and that the blessing of God would bountifully flow out on all of us who trust in His help and who hope and believe that the Lord will not forsake us all in the new year. Today in the Kremlin, the Security Council met on the Chechen crisis. Opening the meeting, the President, Boris Yeltsin, said that the members of the Security Council today must determine the date for the units of the Ministry of Defense to cease all combat action in the Chechen Republic and for them to hand over the functions of establishing law and order and disarming the unlawful groups to the Ministry of Internal Affairs, the militia and internal forces. Boris Yeltsin emphasized that units of the Ministry of Defense will remain in their positions but will not be involved in combat. The President of Russia noted that an ambiguous attitude has developed to the question whether bombing of Grozny has ceased or not. The adopted corresponding decision of the President was heard throughout the world. All of Russia knew about it, reminded the head of state. At the same time, Boris Yeltsin has information that bombing has not yet ceased. In this connection, the President demanded that the Minister of Defense, Pavel Grachev, should provide precise information on this matter. The third problem, which was discussed by members of the Security Council, regarded the functioning of the interim government of national rebirth of Chechnya and the participation of ministries and departments of Russia in restoring the entire system of business life in the Republic. In the announcement conveyed in the evening by the press service of the President on the results of the meeting, however, nothing is said about the date of stopping combat. In the document, it's noted that during the operation to disarm the unlawful armed groups on the territory of the Chechnya Republic and clearing Grozny from mercenaries and gunmen, control was established of the federal state rule in several regions of the Republic and key objects of its capital. The majority of the heavy armaments of the unlawful gangs has been annihilated or put out of commission, and conditions have been established in Grozny for the interim government of national rebirth to begin functioning. The Security Council has stated that the basic objectives of the first phase placed before the units and subdivisions of the armed forces of Russia have been fulfilled. In these circumstances, not ceasing efforts in searching for means of political regularization, in the near future it's necessary to finally overcome the armed resistance, fully complete the task of disarming and liquidating unlawful armed formations, and provide conducive conditions to restore constitutional lawfulness and law and order on the territory of Chechnya. The Security Council emphasized, it says in the statement of the press service of the President, that the combat phase in restoring constitutional law, fullness and law and order in Chechnya is coming to an end. A decision was adopted in which the concrete measures are defined to restore the Chechnya Republic as a full-fledged subject of Russia. For the first time during the entire period of Chechen events, relatives of soldiers in the region will have an opportunity to learn something of the fate of their relatives. By decision of the Security Council, the conscription stations which recruited the fellows will have to supply this information. In general, human rights were paid great attention at the Security Council meeting. The Observation Committee, headed by the new Minister of Justice, the Communist Vladimir Kovalyov, is immediately flying to Grozny in order to, on location, find out the status of rights and liberties of Russian citizens. As usual at the meeting, information was reported by force ministers. I absolutely believe those who have reported at the Security Council, Grachov, Yerin, Stepashin, and Yegorov. Despite predictions regarding the decision of the Security Council on mass media, there will be no punitive measures taken, although at the session, the not quite adequate elimination of events was mentioned. But apart from Chechnya, Vladimir Shmeyka said there are no more important topics currently for the Security Council. The press service of the government of Russia conveyed to Interdas the following information. According to the command of the federal forces in the Chechen Republic, this morning several units and detachments of Russian troops continued to move along the eastern bank of the river Sanjat toward the center of Grozny. The troops occupied the former Institute of Oil Chemistry in immediate proximity of the presidential palace, which during the Dudayev rule was used as a military college. And as a correspondent of Interfax reports from Grozny, Russian troops at dawn today began massive artillery fire at the capital of Chechnya from all forms of artillery, including reactive engulfing fire installations. The center of the city was under fire and after midday was shifted to the northern fringes, where 5 kilometers from the center of Grozny, a line of contact passes between the federal forces and the Dudayev insurrection. Intertas reports that significant changes in the situation in Grozny did not occur in the last 24 hours. Artillery firing was conducted, series of automatic shooting was heard, and clashes continued near the Cossack village Osyanovskaya. Today in Grozny, a state of tense anticipation remains of the renewal of active combat by the Russian armed forces, and rumors circulate throughout the city that in order for the city to be taken without battle, gases could be implemented. Of course, any war decides certain problems in a cardinal manner, and some people still believe this illusion. But the longer the war lasts, the greater the accumulation and growth of these problems and questions. This war had a good excuse to confiscate weapons from unlawful formations, but a large Russian city is demolished to its base. Only yesterday, for some reason, they bombed 4 villages. Who needs this? And why are Russian boys being killed and becoming invalids in military uniforms? These were somewhat lucky. They are in prison and still alive. The Chechens showed us them this morning in the basement of the destroyed presidential palace in Grozny. They were imprisoned during the last unsuccessful attack. My name is Vitamichka Viktor Vyacheslavich. Where were you injured? Here, on the square. My vehicle was hit, and the Chechen soldiers saved me. They brought me here. And then it turned out that those 3 people that were with me, they died, they burned alive, and I was saved. Koldashov Dima, where are you from? The Chelyabinsk district. Did you know that you would get into this mess? When they were transporting us, they never said anything, but when we arrived, here we were told that we will be fighting. Today here in the Caucasus, one can more clearly hear the healthy voice that the Chechen problem probably cannot be resolved by blood, even very large amounts of blood. Peaceful dialogues are needed. The building of the operational staff of the Russian forces, which heads the operation in Chechnya on disarming the unlawful formations, a Chechen kamikaze attempted to blow up. Interfax was reported today by an informed military source. According to him, the 5th of January, the suicide driver directed a Zhiguli automobile loaded with an explosive to the headquarters of the command in Grozny. However, the vehicle didn't reach its destination and blew up when it hit a mine. Dialogues between representatives of the command of the federal forces and the Chechen forces occurred in Grozny. As today a correspondent of Intertas learned, the topic was developing conditions for gathering up bodies of the military on the city streets, identifying them and interring them. The results of the dialogues are not yet known. According to official data, as of today during combat in Chechnya, 256 Russian military servicemen have died. A representative of the headquarters of land troops told Interfax that, according to official statistics, at 1800 hours of today, since the time the troops were deployed in Chechnya, the 11th of December, 116 land military servicemen died, motor artillery troops and tank soldiers. The commander of the military paratrooper forces, the Colonel General Yevgeny Podkozin, said that during combat in Chechnya, around 100 air paratroopers air paratroopers have died. In the headquarters of the Command of the Internal Forces of the Ministry of Internal Affairs, also it was reported that as of today, in Chechnya, 40 military servicemen of the internal forces have died. Today, the President of Russia, Boris Yeltsin, met in the Kremlin with the Chairman of the Commission on Human Rights under the President, Sergei Kovalyov. Having carefully heard the information and assessments of the situation regarding human rights in the Chechen Republic, the President thanked the Chairman of the Commission on Human Rights for the additional information which gives an opportunity to give a more in-depth understanding of the conditions in the conflict zone from the point of view of the rights of individuals and humaneness. The President told Kovalyov that he will issue instructions to shift the regularization from force efforts onto the level of the peacekeeping process with the aim of restoring the application of the Russian Constitution on the territory of the Republic of Chechnya and also to observe human rights. The person appointed to be responsible for the process is Viktor Chernomyrdin. The throng of the people was so great that it seemed that Sergei Kovalyov was left to be last and the only person who could report on the true picture in Chechnya. Apart from the journalists, even envoys of 10 developed countries came to the meeting with the deputy. Incidentally, this discussion was held behind closed doors. Interest in the press conference was fueled also by the fact that yesterday a conversation was held of the human rights advocate with the President, at which Kovalyov intended to open Boris Nikolaevich's eyes to what is really occurring. As Sergei Adamovich said, the meeting lasted exactly 49 minutes and probably was more of a monologue, his own monologue. Yeltsin, in the end, only summarized, "Your point of view will be considered." To the journalists who pressed him for details, Kovalyov attempted to chronologically reproduce everything which was said at the meeting. Boris Nikolaevich was sufficiently laconic. "I can only say that, to me, his face seemed to be concerned and at times very dissatisfied. The FSK, I said, is acquiring information in such a manner." Boris Nikolaevich again repeated that his information is sufficiently complete, and he immediately, after that, in his next sentence, refuted that assertion, stating that he's completely convinced that after his address to the people on the 27th of December, there were no further bombings of Grozny. I asked him, "And don't you believe me?" "No, I believe you." And I spoke further about his personal responsibility for the actions of his immediate circle. And I said, "You are to blame for this because you chose your own team." No, he didn't respond to that. In my opinion, he was very dissatisfied. I'm surprised, because I called these people scoundrels, and no one asked me, who are these scoundrels? Sergei Adamovich confirmed again his own plan to resolve the crisis, to withdraw troops to their original positions, relocate the units after a mutual agreement, and a new controlling organ. And after that, dialogues, dialogues, and dialogues. He even offered to Boris Yeltsin today, on Christmas Eve, to declare a truce. Boris Nikolaevich said, "This is too early." The Council of the State Duma at its session examined the question on convening a special session of the Chamber on the situation in Chechnya. Today, while in the building of the State Duma, the traditional session of the lower chamber of Parliament, which is close to the press, was underway, journalists reported to their stations excerpts from interviews with deputies, the majority of whom preferred to harshly criticize the actions of the government of Chernomyrdin on resolving the Chechen crisis. However, they avoided predictions on the date of the next special session of the Duma. After a half-hour discussion, which demanded that the Duma convene tomorrow and that the faction Russia's Choice found themselves in a minority on this, Ivan Rybkin was accused of his tardiness and other parliamentary colleagues who had insisted on holding a meeting on Chechnya the 11th of January. Excuse me. The leadership of the Federative Council feels it's not feasible to call a joint meeting of both chambers of parliament regarding the situation in Chechnya. As this was learned by the agency RIA News, is said in the letter of the chairman of the higher chamber, Vladimir Shumeka, to the leader of the Duma faction, the communists, Gennady Zyuganov, who recently had approached the former with that suggestion. The opinion of Shumeka is that a joint session of both chambers of parliament will not yield practical results and will probably be more of a political nature. Today in Moscow, the creation of the Public Commission on investigating cases of violation of the Constitution and war crimes in Chechnya was announced. It was offered. The committee be headed by the authorized human rights representative Sergei Kovalyov. The deputy, Yuri Chernyshenko, cited the violated statutes of the Constitution when the opinion of Parliament was ignored in questions of war and peace, and also reminded about the criminal responsibility ensuing in 10 years in prison for violating rights and liberties of people. The deputy, Alexandra Achirova, stated that the first victims among the refugees in the Ingushetian territory during the troops' relocation to Chechnya. In the opinion of the deputy Sergei Yushchenkov, the army was placed as a decoy. The fact of the resignation of the group of generals is evidence of a refusal to participate in war, which destabilized the situation in Russia. In my opinion, interested in destabilizing the situation are special services of Russia and the immediate circle of Yeltsin. They truly have something to lose. Answering the question of the press, Sergei Yushchenkov refuted accusations against Yegor Gaidar that he ostensibly was involved in supplying weapons to Dudaev units. The troops of the Soviet Union, and not Russia, were withdrawn from Chechnya in the end of 1991, he reminded. There's an attempt to lay a certain degree of blame on Shaposhnikov, but involved in this matter, as far as I know, was his deputy, Grachov. Yuri Lushkov, who previously didn't comment on the events in the Northern Caucasus, today stated his position. After visiting the new heating station in the Moscow micro-area, Mityino, the mayor of Moscow supports the actions of the president. But there is a second part to that question. I feel those actions which executed these principal decisions were inept. And first of all, that is on the part of the Ministry of Defense. Instead of a surgical operation, we have here butchers. And how did events in Chechnya influence the criminal situation in Moscow? At one time, much was said about possible terrorist acts. 3 terrorist acts, 2 on the railway and 1 in a bus. We relate to the actions of the Chechen gunmen. Yuri Lushkov doesn't exclude terrorist acts in the future, but according to him, in Moscow there are enough forces to control the situation. In the opinion of Lushkov, Chechnya in the last years had sufficiently great influence on Moscow and all Russia. As example, the mayor cited the so-called Chechen mafia. This is one of the strongest mafia structures which functioned in Moscow. Now, of course, it is somewhat otherwise as a result of those measures which were undertaken here in our city with the joint efforts of the Ministry of Internal Affairs, the city, and other structures. Yuri Lushkov is certain that the wholeness of Russia will be preserved. But regarding the actions of the Ministry of Defense in Chechnya, according to the mayor, the conclusions made there must be unanimous. The ineptness of the action conducted in Chechnya was manifested in the fact that the war against Dudaev became a war against the Chechen people and, moreover, a common national tragedy. This is the opinion of the Deputy Chairman of the Federative Council, Ramazan Abdullah-Tipov, and he stated this today to a correspondent of Tartas during his business tour through the Caucasus region. In this situation, in his opinion, the President of Russia and the Federal Assembly could come together in order to give a political assessment of what is occurring and develop amendments to the Constitution, which would allow, through the coordinated actions of the head of state and parliament, to provide a mechanism to resolve the situation. The issue now is the national security of Russia, stated Ramazan Abdullah-Tipov. Today, the deputy chairman of the Federative Council arrived in Abkhazia in order to personally verify information about the presence of bases to train gunmen for deployment in Chechnya within Abkhazia. To stop dispatching combat units currently posted in Chechnya, soldiers who served in the army less than a year, and to recall from there those who have not yet served that year, the Council of Parents of the Military Service of the Russian Federation intends to demand from the Ministry of Defense. Tartas reports the heads of the Council intend to submit their demand to the military minister at a meeting which it is currently pursuing. Currently, at this time, he, according to our information, is alive and well. The hotline. This was the name given in the general headquarters, the newly created line of communications with the public. Now, at any time of the day, by dialing number 293-5592, relatives and friends can receive information about military who are in Chechnya. The psychological load on the officers on duty is such that each 40 minutes they have to replace each other. It's truly a hotline. There can be no other name for it. There is not a second when the phones are idle. Not a second. They phone us from everywhere, from other cities. Basically, of course, they are mothers and relatives. But there are, of course, organizations. Daily, at 7 a.m., to the operational team from Mozdok, from the medical military department, news arrives about all the casualties and injuries. If necessary, the duty person contacts the hospital's headquarters of military units and specifies the concrete location of a soldier or officer. And by the 15th of January, this group will have lists of names of those servicemen within units and subdivisions participating in combat operations. According to information received by the correspondent of RIA News, Jahar Dudayev is well and alive and in Grozny. However, for now it's not known in which underground bunker, either under the presidential palace, under the building of the ministerial council, or elsewhere, the general is hiding, who does not make any radio contact so as not to be pinpointed. His wife, Alamonina, who left Chechnya well in advance, is currently living in the Estonian city Tartu, and the son of Dudayev, who was rumored to be seriously injured, according to certain reports, is well and is living in Munich. According to the Center of Public Communications of the Russian Ministry of Internal Affairs, during the combat operations in Chechnya, 37 servicemen of the Internal Affairs were killed, 92 were injured. Among those killed, there are 22 soldiers of emergency service. Today, in Moscow, a requiem was served for the dead. You contemplate about the sense or meaning of their death. The meaning is most elevated. They gave their lives for the sake of their devotion to Russia, in the name of its wholeness. They are soldiers and they have fulfilled their order. All these people that were killed either from around a corner or out of a house or in other such circumstances or out of a crowd, not honestly in combat. In an honest one-to-one combat, they don't fight. They attack like wolves at night, as a rule, from around a corner or from a village. The Dudayev regiment is doomed. The acting director of the American Committee on the Defense of Journalists, William Orn, sent a letter to the President of Russia, Boris Yeltsin, in which he expresses serious concern regarding the treatment of journalists who are reporting on the conflict in Chechnya. The death of the American photojournalist Cynthia Elbaum and the correspondent of the Red Star newspaper, Vladimir Zhitarenko, are evidence of a dangerous new tendency of that conflict. The Committee in Defense of Journalists is concerned also over the statement of Russian and foreign correspondents that the government of the Russian Federation had attempted to establish information control in the conflict zone, spreading through sources of mass media misinformation and exerting pressure on journalists to abandon Chechnya. Today, in the office of the Red Star newspaper, they said farewell to one more journalist who died in Chechnya, Vladimir Mikhailovich Zhitarenko. Fate is unjust. Vladimir Mikhailovich returned unharmed from Afghanistan, Pridnestrovye, Tajikistan, and died on his native Russian soil in the first hours of the new year. He died fulfilling his professional duty. The death of a journalist always produces legends. Yesterday, rumors circulated that perhaps not a Chechen, but a Russian bullet ended the life of the journalist. Is it so important to decide this at the open grave? War is at fault, and journalists don't fight on someone's side. They risk their own lives and attempt, despite everything, to tell people the truth. Today in Moscow, on the eve of Christmas, military veterans of various generations met. 10 new automobiles, a gift to invalids of the Afghanistan war from the veterans organizations in the government of Moscow. This Christmas gift was made possible after the presidential decree according to which operations of Afghan organizations are not taxable and their profits can be directed towards social rehabilitation of invalids. I feel that the army, the representatives of our army, they are those people of whom our country may be truly proud. And these 10 cars, which were provided by the Russian Fund of Invalids of the War in Afghanistan with the cooperation of the Safa Bank, I think they are not the first nor the last donation. They give an opportunity to somehow recompense the health which they lost at that war. Today, the veterans organizations have a chance to support the past invalids, and how about those who very soon will return from the battlefields with lost health and often ability to work? Without a system of social rehabilitation and financial support, it will be difficult for them. That's one more problem, and to solve it without the federal authorities is impossible. And now, one more report from the site of events in Grozny. We just now received material from our special correspondents Grigory Brinza and Vakhtang Miboni. Russian units who occupied defense positions 1 week ago in the area of the poker plant, that's the northwesterly part of Grozny, are conducting a shell and artillery cannonade of the city. During the day, shells fall in the center, and when darkness falls, firing acquires a chaotic nature, and as a result of that, suburbs of Grozny are hit. Powerfully hit today were city blocks where oil and railway workers live. Over Grozny in the sky today, again, Su-27 planes appeared. In Grozny itself, during the last 24 hours, not much has changed. The armed units of Jakhar Dudayev, as previously, control the majority of the city. In the center, severe clashes are underway. Russian forces managed to occupy only the northeastern part of the city. In Hungary, the currently acting chairman of the Organization on the Security and Cooperation in Europe expressed alarm on the development of events in the Russian Federation on the territory of Chechnya. The Minister of Foreign Affairs of that country, Laszlo Kovacs, today issued a statement on that matter. Budapest emphasizes that in compliance with basic principles of the CSCE, the territorial wholeness of Russia is inviolable. The crisis in Chechnya can be resolved only on the basis of the Constitution of the Russian Federation. At the same time, Hungary feels that the military conflict on the territory of Chechnya carries within it a serious threat not only to the security of Russia, but to the entire region and the European continent as a whole. The Japanese government expressed concern over developments in Chechnya. As a correspondent of Vitartas was told in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Japan, a corresponding statement on this account was conveyed to the government of Russia through diplomatic channels. The Minister of Foreign Affairs of Great Britain, Douglas Hurd, sent out a message today to the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Russia, Andrei Kozyrev, in which he expressed concern over the continuing combat in Chechnya and also spoke out for a political solution to the crisis. Clashes with police ended the demonstration in Istanbul. More than 2,000 people with the slogans, "The Chechen Revolution is our revolution," came out into the streets in order to, in this way, express their protest against the actions of the Russian army in Chechnya. The extremely aggressive people demanded the immediate withdrawal of troops and the full independence for that republic to be granted. According to the agency Reuters, at the same time it was learned that Russian army choir and dance troupe concerts were cancelled in Turkey. Libya has demanded an emergency session of the Ministers of Foreign Affairs be called in the organization the Islamic Conference to discuss the critical situation in Chechnya. As was learned today, official Tripoli generated this initiative after the meeting of the head of the Libyan revolution, Muammar Gaddafi, with the Chechen delegation which arrived in Jamahiriya. It would be naive to expect that the Muslim countries would remain indifferent witnesses to everything happening within Russia. The reaction is evident, although at times it is of an unbalanced nature. From Istanbul, news arrived that a group of 5 or 6 people attacked the Consulate General of the Russian Federation. With cries of "Allah is great," unidentified persons threw 3 Molotov cocktails at the building. And we often heard that in Grozny fighting Russian troops are mercenaries from Afghanistan and Jordan. And if they are, then clearly without the blessing of their official governments, information was distributed that the Chechens ostensibly receive weapons from Saudi Arabia and other Muslim countries. In this connection, we will note that such facts are not precise and must be seriously verified, especially since the East obviously dismisses any influence on the events in Chechnya. So one mustn't be mistaken, because the Chechens and no one else are the only defenders of their business, and they have almost no help to expect from outside. If a separatist battle kindles support in some countries of Islam, but there is no hope of more serious aid. The official East is more interested in restoring calm and order as soon as possible under the roof of the Russian house. On a larger account, all countries whose national flags bear the color green, the color of Islam, demonstrate obvious restraint regarding events in Chechnya. Who knows, maybe the bad example of Chechnya can be contagious for their own national minorities. Returning to today's meeting of the Security Council, it's interesting to note that before its beginning, in the corridors, the Minister of Defense Pavel Grachev expressed dissatisfaction with the campaign of mass media against the army. He promised also to speak about this at the Security Council meeting. And after lunch, certain results of this verbal artillery preparation perplexed many journalists. Today, the entire afternoon, information agencies were in a quandary. They either reported that Oleg Poptsov was dismissed from the post of the chairman of the pan-Russian television radio company or refuted that report. The reason of the dismissal they called inadequate from the point of the view of the leaders of the country of the presentation of events in Chechnya. The rumor, luckily, at this moment was not confirmed, but the fact that it appeared at all indicates much. Yes, the situation in Chechnya truly is extremely complicated and is not prone to be easily resolved either by political or military means. This is a fact which is indisputable. But there is an attempt to place the blame for all on mass media. Alas, we have seen this in our country before in the distant Soviet and the not-so-distant democratic past. Head editors of newspapers were replaced. In the seat of the chairman of the television radio company Ostankino recently, no one sat for more than a year. Well, is life better because of that? I think not. Unfortunately, the habit of breaking mirrors or lynching heralds of bad news, which we inherited from Bolshevism, cannot be uprooted. But what a shame. The press secretary of the president, Vyacheslav Kostikov, did not confirm to a correspondent of Vitritas the fact of the signing of such a decree. The first aide of the president, Viktor Ilyushin, also stated that the decree on the dismissal of Oleg Poptsov did not originate in the administration of the head of state today. However, the labor collective of the pan-Russian state television radio company today at its conference adopted an appeal to the president of Russia with a request to consider the opinion of the collective in deciding the question about Oleg Poptsov continuing to occupy the post of the head of the company. We learned, it says in the appeal, that a draft decree on the dismissal of the chairman of the Russian television, Oleg Poptsov, was prepared. The labor collective expresses hope that this document is prepared not on the personal instructions of the president, but on the initiative of part of his circle. Such a decision, if it is adopted, the collective will interpret as the beginning of the annihilation of Russian radio and television, and in essence, glasnost and freedom of speech in Russia. With this, I bid you farewell. Congratulations on the approaching feast and all the best. Goodbye. Four starts and 4 victories, a brilliant start for the Russian team from the team Kamaz Master, headed by the driver Viktor Moskovskih. Our Kamaz leads the marathon by 1.5 hours ahead of last year's champions, the Czechs on the Tartar. In the leaders of the other group, another Kamaz, Vladimir Marchenkov. On the prototypes, in the lead is the 2-time winner of the Dakar, Ari Vater, on the Citroen, and the Austrian Hans Kiligarten. Good evening, and just now we received more news from Morocco. The Kamaz of Viktor Moskovskih is again first, and so the grandiose auto marathon, colored in yellow colors in the desert continues. We'll wish success to the Russian racers and turn to another main event in the world of motors. The new World Speedway Championships in the new year will be started by Russia the 28th and 29th of January in the suburban Moscow-Krasnogorsk. All the best racers of the world. Today in Moscow, press conference was held. Journalists were demonstrated the models of the amateur radio satellite Radio Rostov, launched in December. In the suburban Moscow Vidny today, there are Christmas car races, the initiative of the racer Fyodor Shilov. Here there was everything which makes winter auto tournaments attractive, and Christmas champagne to the winner, Sergei Baranov. This was a prelude to the race Saturday in Krylatsky. On the ice of the Moscow Sokolniki Palace, the Pan-Russian Festival of Figure Skaters, Mastery and Inspiration, the champion among figure skaters, the Olympic champion from Petersburg, Alexei Urmanov. And in contrast, we go to the hot summer of Australia. Here, the success of the family duo of Ukrainian tennis players on the way to the finals of the Hopman Cup tournament. Natalia Medvedeva beat Yana Novotna from the Czech Republic, and her brother Andrei beat the Czech Petr Kordai. In the decisive match, the Ukrainian tennis players will play their rivals from Germany for the main prize, $154,000. Good evening. The prediction for the weather for tomorrow. The warm air continues to spread toward the east. It will be warmer in the Kola Peninsula and in the west of the Republic of Komi. In these areas, under the influence of an atmospheric front, it will be cloudy with periods of snow and possible isolated blizzards. Temperatures from 0 to -5. In the Arkhangelsk district, in the Nenetsk Autonomous District, and the northeast of the Republic of Komi, windy and also cloudy with isolated patches of snow. Temperatures -5 to 10. In northeast Komi, -20 degrees. In the Baltic countries, the northwestern area, the central and Volgovyatsk areas will be under the influence of a lethargic anticyclone with a center over the central Volga. Here it will be variably cloudy without much precipitation. Temperatures at night -5 to 10. In some places down to -18. During the day, -3 to 8 degrees. The anticyclone over the central Volga will influence the weather of Belarus, Ukraine, Moldova, and the central Chernozem areas. Here it will be variably cloudy without precipitation. Temperatures from -8 to 13. During the day, -2 to 7 degrees. A lethargic atmospheric front will define the weather in the Krasnodar and Stavropol-Rim areas over the lower Volga and in the republics of the northern Caucasus. Here the weather will be unpleasant. There will be rain with wet snow, and winds will be as strong as 25 meters per second. Temperatures from -3 to +2 degrees. The Chechen and Ingushetian republics have icy roads with patches of fog, temperatures around 0. Beyond the Caucasus, cloudy with isolated wet snow, temperatures 0 +5 in Armenia, from -4 to +1 degrees. In St. Petersburg, tomorrow will be partly cloudy. Winds are from the southeast, 3 to 6 meters per second. Temperatures at night, -7 to 9. During the day, -4 to 6 degrees. In Moscow, partly cloudy skies without precipitation. Winds are weak. Temperatures at night, -10 to 12. During the day, -5 to 7. In the next 2 days, in Petersburg and in Moscow, the weather will remain the same. This broadcast has used information from the Oceanic Meteorological Center of Russia. Merry Christmas.